poor from the business world. One of the main domains that's been termed is called BOP, bottom of the pyramid or base of the pyramid. So this kind of field was started by a guy, C.T. Prahalad, and he wrote a book called Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. Since then, there's been 20 different books in this space. But the idea behind this book is, he said, there's a common thread of business strategies that are serving, what he calls the base of the pyramid. And he uses that term. Sometimes people use the term majority world, but it's that there's a lot of people in the world who have low income. And what you have to do is you have to start your design. So here's some of the principles. You have to start your design with a price. So this would apply to social enterprises, but some of these principles also will apply to how you serve the poor in a nonprofit. You start your design with, a price that the base of the pyramid could afford. So if you're offering some sort of product, you have to scale your operations. You have to de-skill work. You have to innovate on your processes. And I'm going to get into, what's the practical implications of this. So, you've often probably heard of the iron triangle of project management. You can pick cost, speed, and quality, pick 2 out of the 3, or sometimes you only pick 1 depending on how important things are. And so there's key things to think about. So, and I'll just use an example. So say you're doing thrift stores right now. And thrift stores, there's some that are thriving, and there's some that honestly they're being crushed. And the reason why they're being crushed is because they don't understand these principles of base of the pyramid. So they don't understand that high volumes needed to achieve low cost. So they used to achieve low cost based on this third bullet point, which is labor and time is cheap for the poor. And you would run your program, and you would have the people from your program running your thrift store. But now the dollar store is beating you because they have higher volume than you, and they may be offering products. People, instead of going to your thrift store in your neighborhood, they're going to the dollar store, or they're going to some other budget store that has high scale. There's other principles like pay as you go. Like if you look at the cell phones that are out there that are serving the low income, usually pay as you go is the way to go. So there's many different case studies of how you have social enterprises. So thrift stores, as I mentioned, is an example. So you're going to have to figure out how do you make things be cost efficient. But there's a lot of ministries that are also doing catering businesses and culinary programs, and a lot of these principles apply. So you have to figure out how are you going to de-skill the work so that someone doesn't have to have high skills to do some of the work and things along those lines. So that's just an overview. Why are we, as you go into the base of the pyramid, bottom of the pyramid stuff, why are we doing that? Now, another thing is you work on projects. You're going to often, in business and social enterprise, you'll have to look at this project management triangle. And, if you're serving the poor, where you're on that triangle is going to change. So this is something we have to consider at City Vision often. If we're trying to provide an education, and say we're going to serve in Ethiopia where, even the highest end colleges only cost $500 a year, you have to change the design dramatically. So, do you start with fixed quality design, or do you start with a fixed cost design? In Ethiopia, you have to start with, how can I provide an education for $500? Whereas in the U.S., generally they'll say, a lot of schools will say, how can I provide the best quality education? And then, okay, that's going to cost you $35,000. Now, the other thing is on speed, I think there's an adaptation frequency and a more adaptive design. So cultural minorities with limited resources often face environments with more unknowns than Western educators. So part of what I'm going to get at is you're going to have to adapt more as you're working in a cross-cultural setting. You can't just follow, always follow just the best practice. And then the other thing is quality. Often quality is basically defined in terms of what middle-class Western audiences want. And often how you define quality is going to be much more important how it's contextualized. So, for example, you could have a world-class movie, and if it's not in the language you can understand, that's not going to help you, right? So that's just an example. This is an example of how waterfall design works. And waterfall design basically is you're going to do a project, and you'll spend maybe the first year, and this is it. I'm using this example at City Vision. So in the way traditional schools work is they say, we're going to serve traditional students, we're going to, serve people in traditional fields, and then we're going to create courses. And, this whole process will take 5 years to develop a new course. But there's other ways in project management. And what I'm trying to do is translate the concept of project management and what are the elements of project management that are important to understand cross-culturally. So, waterfall is the more traditional way to approach project management, but then there's other approaches called Agile and Lean Startup. And so the difference is waterfall, you might take 5 years, launch a product, and get feedback. Agile, the idea is you might let's use this in a nonprofit example. You might spend 3 years designing a new program to serve, men, and then you launch it, and then you get feedback, and then in another 3 years you revise it. Whereas Agile, you might, slowly release new parts of the program each week. But the idea behind Lean is you would, maybe once a month make major modifications to the program and iterate until you get a good program, and then you can stabilize it. And that's the idea behind this Lean Startup. So some people have wondered, why do we use the Lean Startup as the framework in our social entrepreneurship course? There's a lot of different frameworks, but the main reason is because in a cross-cultural setting where you're serving the poor, where you're serving an adaptive environment, you need to use a model like this. And the idea is you learn quickly, you build, and then you iterate and you measure, and you try to go through this as quickly as possible.